That morning, the culinary students were in for a Hell's Kitchen. On Saturdays, the Culinary Institute would open something of a pop-up restaurant. The students were supposed to get it all: piling orders, dissatisfied guests, and the crazy rhythm of a real restaurant. The one supervising the process was their favorite teacher, Chef Brophy. At about 8 a.m., June 2, 2018, the students entered the kitchen, but the lesson never even started. Chef Brophy was down on the floor with a gunshot wound. The shocked students called an ambulance, but their teacher did not survive. The man was filling buckets with water and ice when he was shot. The first bullet got him in the back. The second one hit his chest. Nothing was missing in the kitchen. There was no reason to suspect a robbery. The perpetrator meant to deal with the chef. Could it be that this amicable mustached man had crossed someone's path and this someone decided to kill him? Could it be that Chef Brophy had been hiding something from his colleagues and students? The house of Daniel Brophy and his wife Nancy was sinking in a flower garden. The couple lived in a quiet suburb of Portland, Oregon. In the summer of 2018, Daniel was 63 and Nancy almost 68. She was a writer, and the very reason we get to know the Brophy's settled life in such detail. Here is what Nancy wrote in her blog. I live in the beautiful, green, and very wet Northwest, married to a chef whose mantra is, life is a science project. As a result, there are chickens and turkeys in my backyard, a fabulous vegetable garden which also grows tobacco for an insecticide, and a hot meal on the table every night. Here, in this garden, Daniel grew his culinary herbs. Moreover, he was an expert mushroom hunter and a master of haute cuisine. Daniel's career started with dishwashing in a restaurant in Kansas. With time, the man underwent a culinary education and started working for European chefs. In 2018, he was one of the most respected instructors at the Oregon Culinary Institute.
You can go to any market, they've got mild Italian sausage, they've got spicy Italian sausage. So just the amount of chili, there's a customer for that, you just can't let them be surprised by it.
Chef Brophy, that's what Daniel's students called him. He was strict, but not without a sense of humor. Brophy often went on day trips with his chefs-to-be. They gathered mushrooms and visited different farms. Daniel showed them how to find haute cuisine ingredients in the wild. Daniel cooked at home as well. He was the one responsible for the hot dinners on their table. He did the laundry and often treated his wife to a cup of coffee in bed. And Nancy, as the relatives say, was always supportive of her husband. That fatal June of 2018 changed it all. A week after Daniel's death, a vigil was held outside the institute. Reporters were present. Many people came to remember him with kind words. Nancy was among them too, a sad, gray-haired Nancy who was now alone in the house with the beautiful garden. 3 weeks after her husband's death, she mustered the courage to pack his things up. Nancy set aside Chef Brophy's cherished treasures to give them to the people he loved. His canned goods, his Northwestern sauce, his habanero sauce. Some of their closest friends and relatives got his favorite t-shirts. Suddenly, in September, handcuffs clicked shut on Nancy's wrists. Sure thing, suspecting a victim's spouse is part of the investigative routine. But in this case, it seemed like the police put the blame on a defenseless lady, for they could not find the real killer. Nancy had spent 25 years of her life with Daniel. They'd always been on good terms. In her blog, the woman remembered the time she decided to marry Daniel. I was in the bath. It was a big tub. I expected him to join me, and when he was delayed, I called out, "Are you coming?" His answer convinced me he was Mr. Right. "Yes, but I'm making hors d'oeuvres. Can you imagine spending the rest of your life without a man like that?" It's time for us to get to know Nancy Brophy a little better. Before she met Dan, she'd been married once, to a police officer. Nancy studied economics at the University of Houston, but craved to be a writer more than anything. For some time, Nancy wrote articles for trade journals and took up technical writing for HR departments. Having moved to Oregon, she decided to try her hand at culinary arts, so she went to a culinary college in Portland. There, she started dating an instructor by the name of Daniel Brophy. As a result, Nancy abandoned the cooking and married her teacher instead. As for her work, she chose another kitchen, that one of a writer. Here is the author Nancy Brophy's page on Amazon. The Wrong Cop, The Wrong Seal, The Wrong Husband. These books are part of the series Wrong Never Felt So Right. Nancy is a self-published writer. Her books are those sugary romance novels. But do not jump to conclusions. It's not only love that she wrote about. As a romantic suspense writer, I spent a lot of time thinking about murder and, consequently, about police procedure. After all, if the murder is supposed to set me free, I certainly don't want to spend any time in jail. And let me say clearly, for the record, I don't like jumpsuits and orange isn't my color. Here is an excerpt from Nancy's essay, How to Murder Your Husband. There's a widespread practice among writers to get together and do creative exercises. For instance, writing a text in a certain time frame or on a certain topic. Nancy's essay resulted from one such exercise. She did it as a sample while applying to a writers group in 2011. I don't want to worry about blood and brains splattered on my walls, and really, I'm not good at remembering lies. But the thing I know about murder is that every one of us have it in him/her when pushed far enough. The investigators were baffled by the essay. Here you have a composition about killing a husband, and here you have the husband killed. A mere coincidence? Quite possibly, as a matter of fact. Authors write about murders all the time, and only a few end up in jail. For her books, Nancy conducted extensive research. It is, too, part of a writer's routine. How would you know how a villain acts by just sitting in your armchair with a laptop? How and where do they obtain their weapon? To make a story believable, some writers go to shooting ranges, others interview criminals and police officers. And Nancy? She bought a ghost gun. A ghost gun doesn't have a serial number, so it's very hard to trace. You buy all the parts online, then assemble the weapon at home, and you get the ghost gun. Such a weapon is pretty popular among criminals, both in real life and in books. Nancy Brophy bought a ghost gun kit that she later claimed was necessary for her research. You could make a Glock 19 pistol out of it. In a while, the woman bought another handgun, Glock 17, at a gun show. She then claimed it was for her husband's mushroom hunting trips. Anything could happen in the secluded parts of a forest, you know. Apart from that, Nancy bought a new slide and barrel for the pistol. After Daniel's death, the spare parts magically disappeared from her closet. Where they went to, the woman could not explain. The gun was there though, and it had never been shot from. However, its slide and barrel were not completely in place, and Daniel was killed by bullets from a Glock pistol. In 2019, the police found something new. Nancy was captured on security camera footage. Her minivan was circling the Culinary Institute throughout the fateful morning of June 2. Nancy stopped the car, came inside the building, then came out in just 6 minutes, during the exact time frame when the murder took place. Now, Nancy doesn't deny the fact. She says she gets the ideas for her books while driving, and at the time, she was going around the Institute absent-mindedly, just to ease the imagination flow and devise the things to happen to her characters. Hours later, she was informed of her husband's death. The woman was traumatized by the news so deeply, she had a memory hole. Everything was in a whirl, and the events of that day became unclear and twisted.
You know, this has been so frustrating. I realize that the day of June 2nd, not only is there a memory hole, but I have a hard time making it clear what I actually remember, what people have told me, what I have read, and what I know to be our family routine.
She could not recall her actions or whereabouts on the morning of June 2. Back then, she never told the detectives she went out that day. Meanwhile, the prosecutors established a whole other timeline. Nancy left home at 6 a.m. After that, the surveillance camera captured her van near the Culinary Institute. The woman was driving back and forth, circling the building, and waiting for Dan to get to his workplace. At 7:21 a.m., Daniel disarmed the school alarm and went down into the kitchen. Then, his wife came inside as well, carrying a gun in her purse. In 6 minutes, she was out. At approximately 8 a.m., the students found their instructor close to death. And that is how Nancy Brophy got herself in the dock. Her provocative essay was excluded from the trial. It was written 7 years before Daniel's death. Moreover, it's really unprofessional to bring murder charges based on a piece of fiction. However, even without the essay, the prosecutors had plenty of circumstantial evidence, and the main one was the motive.
This wasn't an accident, clearly. There was no struggle. There was no robbery. There was no interrupted burglary. Whoever went in to the Culinary Institute in that short 6-minute window went in there to kill Dan.
So why would Nancy kill her husband? The most cynical motive surfaced. It was money. In 2017, the Brophies were struggling financially. They could hardly make payments on their mortgage. Meanwhile, Nancy spent a hefty sum of money on the weapon and on life insurance premiums. 3 days after her husband was killed, the woman called the lead detective. She asked for a letter stating she was not a suspect in order to gain the life insurance payout. She sought to collect $1.4 million upon Chef Brophy's death. It was really hard to grasp. The atmosphere during Nancy's cross-examination was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Zane Sparling, the reporter who covered the trial, says,
I hate to say this, but you would not look at her on the street and think that's a cold-blooded killer. That's someone who could shoot their husband in the back with no warning. She looks like a kindly grandmother out of a fable.
This lovely lady was simply not capable of killing her Mr. Right in such a cold-blooded manner. Nevertheless, she was the one who did it. Nancy Brophy was found guilty of second-degree murder. The other aspect to add fuel to the fire was Nancy's digital footprint. Her internet history revealed she searched how to load a 9mm Glock. The investigators also found a bookmarked article called 10 Ways to Cover Up a Murder. Mrs. Brophy never managed to cover up her crime, but she turned out to be a remarkable actress, Zane Sparling says.
She needed to sell this story that she was a loving wife and that she loved her husband. And to be honest, if I was a theater critic giving a review of her performance, I would say she nailed it. Clearly it had been rehearsed, but she hit all her marks. She seemed to know her lines pretty well. She was emotional on the stand. She did tear up a bit, describing how much she loved Daniel Brophy.
The prosecutors proved that this sweet old lady who led her quiet life amidst flower beds was a cold-hearted murderer. Even though Nancy could have enjoyed her husband's company and his tasty dishes for many years to come, it seems, at some point, she craved more chili. The woman knew too much about how Daniel died, Andrea Jacobs, her former cellmate, testified in court.
Because I said, wow, must have been close up, and she used her arm span and said, well, it was about this far.
After the sentencing, Nancy's essay peaked in popularity. It was quoted right and left. Mrs. Brophy made a list of different methods of killing, but none seemed perfect to her. Knives were personal and close up, blood everywhere. Poison was considered a woman's weapon and too easy to trace, she wrote. Guns were loud, messy, and required some skill. Nancy Brophy did gain some skills, it seems, but they were surely not enough to get away with the murder of her husband.